Hey guys, this is Alexander Williamson here with The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. So this is something you probably all recognize if you're aquarium keepers. If you're new to the hobby, you might want to watch this to the end, or maybe if you just don't know how to get one of these started without the little pump, or you have some troubles with it, you might want to watch till the end. We'll do some little tips and tricks at the end, but more importantly, when you're siphoning your aquarium, it is so important to know which kind of substrate you have and which kind of filtration you have, as well as the bioload in your aquarium, because now that I've been a YouTuber for going on 5 years, I've had so many people come to me telling me that their tank crashed, their ammonia spiked, and they don't know what happened. Well, the trail leads back to gravel backing, and so many times I've seen everything from ick to parasites and health problems with fish, all the way to tanks totally crashing and fish dying, and it all goes back to the way that they learn to gravel vac. And there is not one way in which you should gravel vacuum a tank for every aquarium. There are different ways for each setup, and we're going to go over that really quickly right now. So stay tuned, and hopefully we can prevent any of these tank crashes, spikes, or deaths from happening. Thanks for watching. So let's get right into it, okay? Alright guys, so when we're talking about a gravel vacuum, it's basically this contraption. It's just a cylinder, like a straw, a big wide straw, with a tube that runs down, and that's going to go into your bucket, obviously. Now, some of them come equipped with a ball pump to get it going. Now, this can function as a siphon, or it can function as a hand pump if you have an aquarium that's down on the floor and lower than your source of water that you're draining. Now, I'll show you at the end easy ways to get this going and the basics of how to use that, but I'm going to assume that most of you in the hobby know that much already. So for now, I wanted to talk about the much more important piece of this, which is the dangers to your tank. So all of this goes back to how your tank is set up for biofiltration and ammonia. So if you need to know how the cycle of an aquarium works, you should definitely do a search for that. Watch one of my videos or Aquarium Co-op or a number of the amazing videos out there that people have put together and learn that. But basically we have nitrites and nitrates being broken down from ammonia originally. Now, ammonia is made by leaves. It's made by when leaves break and fall off. It's made by excess food when you've put too much food in the water and the fish don't finish it. It's made by fish waste, and it's also just made by, when fish pass away, and that can be a huge spike. So if you are like most people, you have a filter on your aquarium. Now, if we're talking about filterless aquariums, that's a whole different subject, and it's a lot deeper than this. So I'm gonna say that we're not speaking on that right now. But basically, you probably have one of several filters. You either have a hang off the back, like this one, or one of these, and those are the kind that have your media, your filter media, that takes the harmful ammonia and the bacteria on it, break it down, and as water runs over that media, it breaks it down and then incorporates the nitrates into the water instead of the ammonia. So then the nitrates are safer for your fish than the ammonia. So it's like it weakens the ammonia basically and breaks it down into a form that's easier to handle. Now, when we're gravel vacuuming, the main idea is to be stopping the things that are still producing ammonia. And just like when you have a tank and you're trying to keep it balanced, you also need to take into account what it is that you're trying to do and your substrate. So if we have a tank like this, which is very common to have layers of substrate, here we have a soil layer or for a planted tank, and then we have some sand and then some gravel as well as aqua soil on the top. And below all that there's gravel again. Behind that we have a tank that's a bare bottom tank. Over here we have sand, and then down at the bottom we have pure ADA Amano, Takashi Amano's brand of Ammonia substrate, which has active ammonia in it. It has ammonia, nitrites, nitrates, nutrients for plants. So if you have a planted tank, this is a really important video. So when you get into your aquarium and you start gravel vacuuming, you don't want to actually dig into your substrate if you have a stratified tank like this. You don't want to be digging down in there, because those harmful substances that we just talked about, your plants or your filter media filter it. Now hopefully you have enough redundancy in your filtration power that ammonia is getting broken down, and when you get the junk on the bottom of your aquarium, we call that mold. So down here is another good example of an even older aquarium where we have that mold, and you can see layers that have not been disturbed for actual years. And in this aquarium here, we have a layer of silt and mulm that's probably 1/2 inch thick or 1/3 of an inch thick. And then we have some bigger substrate granules that were active with ammonia. But when you're using active substrate soils, those leach off the ammonia, the nitrite, the nitrates, all the good fertilizers. They're basically like root tabs for your entire tank. So they leach this off, and when you're going through that, you can watch videos on active substrates. You need to let them off gas, basically. You need to let the ammonia come off of them, and we get rid of that both through plants eating them with their roots, feeding from the water column, and through water changes, which is one of the reasons why we would use a siphon. So beyond that, if you don't have plants in your aquarium, the only way you're getting nitrates out of your aquarium, and ammonia for that matter, is through your biological filter. So surface area somewhat, your decorations and things do have some bacteria on them, and your water column has an even smaller amount, like 1% of what your tank carries or something to that effect. But really, it's going to be your filtration. So here we have a sponge filter. That's another very common type of filter. Now, what you would use this gravel vac for in this case, for me, is that I've already fed these puffers, and these pea puffers aren't eating the rest of what's in here. So I would gravel vac this, as well as getting any of the clumps that are clogging that filter off. So I would start the siphon and go ahead and pull that right off of there and get those out, because they're just going to break down into harmful ammonia, then into nitrate, then to nitrites. Now that sponge filter will help break that down, but then the nitrates are in here and we have to wait for a water change to get it out. So one, we need to get the water out, and obviously that's happening when you siphon, but we're also getting the chunks of things out from the bottom. Now this tank doesn't have layers where the plants are getting any nutrients from. If it were a very old tank that had sand, it may have layers of mulm, but you're never going to build up mulm or this layer here if you gravel vac your aquariums. So many people choose not to gravel vac their aquariums, and they build up that layer over time, and they count on their exterior filtration, whether that's a canister filter or a sponge filter or a hang off the back filter. It doesn't matter. Any of those work fine. However, if you do have that stratification going on, as soon as you puncture that, it is like a sewer. All that ammonia rich nutrients, it's also got iron, calcium, whatever it is that your fish, that the plants, that the food has in it, all those goodies, those nutrients get locked in there, And if you don't have snails and shrimp and things like that that break it all down, and then they go to the bathroom too, mind you, then that all becomes mulm, and as you can see, the small particulate matter works its way down into the substrate, and after a while it caps itself, or you can put a cap of soil or sand. Sand is denser, obviously, and less permeable. So then you get to a point where you're not losing ammonia and thus building up nitrates in the tank, or nitrates aren't off-gassing from the debris, and your tank is then stable. But as soon as you puncture this, it's like ripping off the lid to a sewer or to a septic tank, and all that stuff that has built up in here, it's no longer in a compact form that's been sifted in small pieces down through the substrate, almost like water makes its way through the water table locally around the world. It then becomes an open sewer, and you kick up this silt, this mud, this muck, and a lot of times that spikes your tank in ammonia. Now, once that happens, you can stress out your fish. Very frequently, when fish are stressed, you can get things like ick, or sometimes even you may have some parasites or something that maybe they were in your tank, but they weren't causing havoc. But as soon as you stress out your fish with that ammonia or nitrite spike of all that stuff, it can cause serious problems. So let's talk about really quickly the what you're going to do with each substrate. So if you have sand, and it's not very old and been allowed to just settle and allowed your filtration to handle all of the process, you don't want to go in and disturb that if it is settled. However, if it's not, you can easily go in and, insert the siphon all the way down the cap part here, all the way down into the sand, and get up all that dirt and muck that's under the sand, rather than just the pieces on top. But if it's in between water changes, you might just want to kind of spot check it and just get any clumps of leftover food or debris, or maybe you have stray plant leaves or something in your aquarium, and that's all you're really doing. You're not disturbing everything. Because if you have a tank like the one down here, these are full of nutrients, as well as I have root tabs in here, and it's a planted aquarium. And so what happens here is that right in the top area, this is going to have already been exposed to the water. It's already leached and off-gassed its harmful properties. However, if we go down into this layer, and I'm not actually going to siphon it because I don't want to cause problems, but I'll show you just for the sake of demonstration, you can see how silty that gets so quickly. And that has so much surface area, and it just kicks up into your tank, and it bursts open that lid on the sewer, so to speak, on all that mulm that's in your tank. Now, many people don't ever want their mulm to build up. However, as long as your filtration, like your hang-off-the-back filter or your sponge filter, has enough surface area that it's processing your aquarium's waste, then it's fine. You can gravel vac to your heart is content. But if you have plants and you have a substrate that's settled and it has debris down in it, do not disturb it. Just gravel vac right above it, and you'll take care of it. And in fact, you might not want to use such a large siphon. You may want to use something as simple as a turkey baster. That is what I use, and most aquascapers use something to that effect. So you can go in and very specifically find little bits of food or whatnot and pick them up one at a time and take care of the issue from there. So turkey baster is a very nice friend, especially to get into little cracks and crevices without moving everything around and stressing your fish out more. Now, if you have a glass bottom aquarium, maybe you're just breeding fish, or maybe it's just shallow gravel, then you can gravel vac that right away, and you should. In fact, unless you are counting on your filter and your water flow to pick up all the debris and waste in your aquarium, you need to do that. So I haven't done it here in about a week, and there is starting to be mulm all over the bottom here, which the snails are eating, and then they're going to the restroom and they're producing more. So that is just putting off nitrates, nitrites, and actual ammonia, which then this filter, as well as another filter on the other end, are having to process, as well as the plants growing. So I either need to remove some plant material, and then that takes the nitrates that were in the plants out with it, and that removes the nitrates, or I need to do a water change. But really, what the gravel vac is for taking on waste that is not already buried in the substrate and feeding your plants. So like in this aquarium, again, you can see where the substrate has not been gravel vacked for several years. So the plants are able to thrive. There's no CO2 or anything in here, just a little light. And the plants are able to thrive and grow and get their nutrients from that. But if I were to have gravel vac that, one, I'd kick up all the debris, but two, that mulm wouldn't be feeding them. It's almost like an entire layer of root tabs built in to your aquarium bottom. So I hope this makes sense, and I hope that this maybe prevents people from gravel vacuuming and disturbing the layers in their aquarium, and also makes you make the decision, if you have a planted aquarium, do I leave it? Do I want to let the debris, the mulm, and the detritus make its way to the bottom, and I'll just take out big chunks or dead fish? Because, you know, one dead fish can spike everything. Or do I want to do something where I keep it crystal clean all the time? You know, you can get polishing pads for the filters and whatnot, and you can do water changes till your heart's content. You know, maybe you want to do 2 a week at 50% for rainbow fish, or for any sort of breeding process where you really need clean water sort of things. However, for most tanks, you don't need to do that, and you can happily start building up layers of substrate, and then that will feed your plants. You don't need to use root tabs and all the other things to the same degree, or CO2 and all those things, to have a very lush ecosystem, when it actually is an ecosystem with the waste fueling the growth of things. So this is the point where I thank you if you've been watching and you just wanted to hear that and hear this is what really crashes a lot of tanks. People go in and they have a tank that they haven't cleaned in months, and they go in and maybe there's a dead fish that is under the substrate. Maybe there's just a whole lot of mulm that had rich ammonia content, and when they kick it all up, it just poisons the water with ammonia and nitrites and nitrates, and the fish get stressed. Then one fish dies, the ammonia gets way higher when that fish dies over the next 12 to 24 hours if you don't pull it out, and from there, you know, problems just spiral. It's so common. And so thanks for watching, and I hope I prevented that for you. And if you're new, or if maybe you just don't like these things and you have a hard time finagling them, then stick around a little longer and I'll show you a couple little quick things about them. Thanks for watching though, guys. If you want more of this info, you know what to do. You can like, subscribe, click the bell, all that stuff. But I won't go through all of the details on that. You can check out the information in the links below. Alright, let's get on to the tips and tricks of getting a siphon started. Alright guys, so first we have to figure out what kind of gravel vac we have. Do we have one of these with the pump and the bulb on it? Or do we have the kind that doesn't have any of that on it? If you have the kind with the pump and the bulb, then you're going to start it very similarly to the way you would without it, which is you just submerge it, let this fill, and let the air out on this end. Let's move this net. And then you can literally just do this and let the siphon start, just like a soda straw. But instead of waiting for that time, you just let it start going and then quickly dunk it back down, and that siphon's going to keep going as long as this is underwater and there's not a big breach of air. Now, to control this, if you need to control the speed, you can simply just crimp it with your thumb or your finger. I like to use my index finger, and that will control the flow of it. Now, if you do have the bulb, however, sometimes this method doesn't work right off the bat. Sometimes you'll actually need to fill this with water. So you put it in at an angle at the surface, and it's filled with water there. And then you use this pump to get the last of the air out. And you pump it a few times, and it's a one-way pump, so it will then put water in there, and now we've got the siphon running down into a bucket. Now, a note about the bucket is if you have a really big tank, you want to make sure that you're using something bigger than, a 5-gallon or 3-gallon or whatever size bucket. You want to use something larger. Whereas if we have a small tank, then don't worry about it. And if you have a small tank, you might want to gravel vac with it half crimped, with it halfway clamped, because then you can gravel a whole lot more surface area. You can get the little spots of food, Remember, we're not going deep into the substrate unless you're not using your substrate as plant food or fuel for the root systems of any plants. Then you don't need to worry about disturbing it. You don't need to worry about releasing that fuel. And you can dig down in there in the sand, gravel, or glass bottom and clean whatever it is you want. So, if you don't have this kind, and you have the kind without the bulb, which we can actually create by just removing the bulb, really quick here. Alright, so if you don't have the bulb and you just have the pipe, then what you can do is you can just do kind of the trick, because you don't have the air trap, but you also don't have the assistance. So instead of sucking on the hose or doing any of that nonsense, you just submerge it, you let the bubbles out, you let it lift up, and it's a tube, so the water's got to go downhill, and then as it's going downhill, before it hits the bucket, you add more. And just like that, pretty soon you got a siphon. So then your siphon's complete. So really you're dunking it under the water twice. You're doing one dunk to fill this and get the air out, and that gets the air out to here in the tube, but you've got air down the rest of the tube. So then you tilt it up and let the water push that air out. But before it's all the way out of however long your tube is, you want to dunk it again and keep that siphon going, and then seal off the air. So one more time, it's just boom, let the water start flowing, boom, and now get the siphon going. And if it doesn't get going right away, or you lose the siphon like this, you can literally pump in your water just like that, and now boom, the siphon's flowing just fine. So those are a couple ways you can start it. Now the last trick is you're going to need the bulb for, and that is if your water source is really low to the ground, like down here, and your bucket is like as tall as your source. Now you're still going to need the end of your tube to be lower than wherever it's intaking liquid from. You're going to need this piece here. This piece has to be higher. It's a tube. Water goes downhill, and the pressure from the air has got to keep it lower. So you got to keep this piece up here, and whenever your bucket gets as full as this is tall, it's going to stop working except for that hand pump. And that hand pump, depending on the one you have, this pump, let's show you real quick, this pump that would just connect to it is a one-way pump, and it's either going to squirt water up like that, or it's a two-way pump, and you can get debris stuck in there, so that's why these come apart. Or it's a two-way pump. This one's a one-way pump, So I get one volume of this plus the tube and the cylinder every time I pump it. I can get that much out of there even if I'm working against gravity. However, if the gravity is, if the outlet end of this is lower than this inlet where we're sucking the water out of, then it will actually continue the siphon. It just may be a little slower. And you can encourage it with this, which clears the tube and the siphon each time you squeeze it. Now, if it were a two-way bulb, like a bilge pump bulb on a boat, then oftentimes when you squeeze in, it actually clears it once, and as you release, it clears it again. However, we don't have one of those. We have a simpler form. And most in the aquarium you're going to deal with will be this simpler form. But that's as easy as it is. And so the other thing you might want to keep in mind is maybe don't use a bucket or something narrow that's tall if you're working on tanks on the ground. And by the way, don't keep your power strip right there. That's just set up right there for the moment. But what you want to do is you want to get a longer container. You could use another aquarium like this one and empty it into that. But the more surface area you have across the ground, the lower that end outlet tube can stay, and you can drain that other tank all the way down to where you need to. So that is the info for you guys, and I hope that helps. I hope that is, it's probably one of the most thorough, if not overdone, videos about gravel vacuuming and siphons you will ever encounter. But that's kind of the format here on The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I see you again next time. Take care, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.